Oh, the fine messes that we make for ourselves. Look at this. All right, guys, made major problems here. Look at this. So it's turned out to be physically impossible to turn this out. I have had to, this is what happens when we get clever ideas like, oh, I'll just quilt this and make it nicer quality. The original directions did call to just quilt the single piece of fabric, which would have been so light. This is where you start crying and you throw the project aside and then you never finish it and you tell yourself, I suck, I can't sew. That's not... That's right, everyone. When we stray from the directions, problems can ensue. Hi everyone, my name is Cassie and you're watching the Victorian Thimble, and today we are making Freddie's vest, or gilet. I did stray from the directions when I started the project, and it did make a series of events or workarounds that I had to do to get the project done. I had a few alarming moments, but I did make it through. Why don't you watch with me today and let's see how we made Freddie's vest. And today we are focusing on Freddie's gilet, or vest, otherwise known as. Once you have your pattern pieces traced out just like you see here, everything is marked up. Then we're going to cut them out with some paper scissors and clip all those notches. Let's go. Now that all the pattern pieces are cut out, you're ready to position them on the fabric. Take note that some of these say main fabric and some say lining. Simply lay these out and cut them out according to what you need for each fabric. Directions show you here how to do quilting by running stitches on a 45-degree angle, and then each next one is just edge of the presser foot apart for your measurements. So I do plan to do this, and you know, I've been playing with some stitch lengths and tensions, trying to get my tension right. It's quite a bit better on this project, but I think I've got something I can work with. But to increase the authenticity, guys, what I'm gonna do, this is literally fleece from the dollar store that you can buy at Christmas time, but I use it for like little table runner projects for quilting, and it's just such a nice, soft, lightweight type of fleece. I think it's perfect for a little project like this. So I'm actually gonna put this against the fabric with the lining back and quilt it before we actually line the jacket. I'll show you. Here we go. In addition to the fleece that I'm using with the fabric, I have this very lightweight polyester cotton blend broadcloth. I mean, it's the really lightweight stuff. So that is what I'm going to put as the layers for the quilt. Is we're going to use the jacket front, the fleece, and then that on top, and then we'll stitch the quilting so it's ready for the lining. Watch as this unfolds. Now if you look, you can see I put a 45-degree angle fabric pen mark. I have my fleece layer and a cotton layer. I put a line there, but I decided I want to top stitch it from the top. Even though I got my thread tension just right on this one, I'm still gonna do it from the top side, is always best and recommended. So I'm gonna do the same with the fronts, and then we're gonna stitch that down. You can see I have everything quilted in one direction only on the 45-degree angle. I know there's always lint on my table, but anyways, you can see when I wasn't pulling the threads through, like the bobbin thread, you see how it made big ugly knots on the end, and then I realized, oh yeah, I gotta pull the threads through. So you see, when you pull your bobbin threads through, the bottom one, when you have that scissors option, you can get a much neater edge like this. But now basically we're going to draw the 45-degree angle the other way on all of these and stitch it the other way next. Here we go. So I wanted to show you guys the use of the ruler when you're setting your 45-degree angle. So what you do is you need to work off of a straight bottom such as this. Naturally there's been a little bit of shifting there, but at this point what we do is work with the stitch line. So what you do is you take your 45-degree angle, line it up to the bottom of your fabric like that. As you can see, we can choose where we're going to land this or opt for something somewhere in the middle, but then watch this. You see all these lines here? Do you see how you can make this? Look up here. We can just adjust that. Make sure your 45-degree angle is carrying through on your stitch lines as well. Move your other stuff out of the way on the cutting board that's messing you up, of course, haha. But in any event, there you can see we have the, this is basically lined up. It's pretty straight. So we're gonna draw a 45-degree angle line so that we can carry on. And now we're gonna sew this the other way. You can see I've got my 45-degree angle line drawn on the garment here, right? And we're ready to sew it. And this is that iron away with heat stuff. The fun thing about this part, guys, is we don't need any pins. Everything is held in place by the first set of quilting. So what I'm gonna do is do one row from this side, and then I'm gonna turn it over and stitch all the rest from the other side. Here we go. All right, everyone, I'm gonna show you where we have this now. So what I have now is these quilted pieces. I'll just show you nice and up close here. You can see the stitching done on 45-degree angles each way. It is done just press your foot width apart. So I'll just show you here, right? Here's a scrap of the fabric. I don't know which, I think that's the front way, right? And that has become this, right? Do you see in there the detail? We still have the herringbone pattern. And basically, guys, as I showed you, I marked out one, and then everything else is presser foot away. There's the occasional spot that the spacing is maybe slightly off because operator error, but in any event, just wanted to be able to show you guys so nice and up close what this is looking like. And so now basically we have the vest or gilet fronts and the back. This is going to get fully lined and assembled with the pockets, the buttons, and everything. But now that we've made this quilted base, we are ready to get started. So now we're going to press the pocket. So you can see the pocket has markings for a deeper hem at the top and then equal on the other sides. What I've done is I've clipped just the smallest bit on each side to make it easy to find where I'm going to fold. And once again, we're just going to find those little snips in the fabric that I made there. And where's the other one? There it is. So one there and one there. So what I've done, I folded this exactly on my little snip lines. Lay that down. Make sure your steam function is off on your iron so you don't burn yourself. And then this is where your steam shot comes in handy. At a time like this, when you need the steam off, then you can just give it a little blast with the steam, and then you don't have steam blowing out on your hands, but there you go. You have one pocket pressed and the next one as well. Beautiful. So now I have both the pocket tops sewn and turned right side out. So you see that's the front of it. It's gonna get pressed. And then on the back, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna press in the sides and the bottom all the way around. I'll press it and come back and show you. Okay, now you should have two little pockets like this, all pressed in, ready to be stitched down. And then I'll just show you in the book. The pictures are good, right? So look here. You can see here what you're gonna do next. You're gonna top stitch that fold for the top. And then the next part you're gonna do is using the pattern piece, you're gonna position the pockets onto the front of the vest and stitch them down. Let's do it. So another hint I wanna give you, these are some of the things that can take heartache out of doing a project. Now that these are quilted, you have to remember, matter cannot occupy the same space, right? Something's gonna shift. So when I look at my finished pieces, if I line them up nice and crisp at the top here, at the shoulder, right? And my neck piece is nicely lined up. So we're gonna go along here with this as our straight, right? But then look what we got going on down here. The bottom of one of these has turned out slightly longer than the other, so I'm gonna have to true that up. And on the other side, there's this much that's off. Fixing this at this stage is gonna make the assembly easier, and I'll show you right now. So here we go. I'm gonna start with this bottom piece. So first, I'm making sure this is, you know, flat along here, the neck piece, and this is straightened up as much as it can be. Yep. And then what I'm going to do, take a ruler. When you cut something like this, you should check for the straight grain this way as well. I do have a minor bit of neatening up to do here, but you see I'm just gonna go to where the top edge of fabric ends, like this. Take your rotary cutter. Look at that. It's just a tiny bit, right? But now the bottom is flush. That's tight. This is what we want, right? So while we're keeping that there, I know this top and bottom are matching. So along here, I'm also going to just true this up ever so slightly, like so. Now we have all of that is tight and true. So turning it over, letting it naturally, you know, stick together, the layers the way it is. Now we're just gonna take this end off here, and then this is gonna be all neatened up again and ready for assembly. I need to get a new blade for my cutter, that's why it's operating a little slow. And then finally, in here, I'm just gonna neaten this ever so slightly with my scissors, right along here like this. Okay, so now look how tight and even these edges are. So why that's important is now I know when I attach the pockets onto this and I position them, they're going to hang even on either side. Let's do that next. So now you can see I have the pockets pinned into place. This is not an exact science, right? Because remember, I had to trim and true the fabric a bit. This took a long time to get it this far, but basically now we're just gonna edge stitch all the way around the pockets to attach them to the front. Let's do that next. I just want to point out that after I quilted these, look at the difference here at the top. Honestly, all that I'm trying to do is position it somewhat centered, and we're simply going to have to trim some of that excess because I'm not starting all that over. We're gonna make this work somehow. This is the reality that sometimes when fabric shifts from quilting or something should have been compensated for that up front. But in any event, we're just going with the pattern. We're gonna do this, and here we go. Next, the directions are showing you to attach the front facing and lining as shown. So you see here, we have the two pieces cut out, the front facing and the front lining. So you see what's gonna happen? You're gonna match these up and you're gonna run a seam along here so that you have an inner lining front piece of the jacket for each side. Now that I have this pressed and turned right side out to see how it's gonna function, now that I'm satisfied with that, now do you see the extra? I can trim that off before I stitch across here. That's what I'm gonna do next. Side two. Now turn it inside out again and close those side seams. So here it is with the front of the jacket stitched. This is what the inside looks like, right? And so when the jacket opens, this is what you're gonna see, right? So now that we have this done this far, I've pressed everything. I'm trying to finger roll and press and manipulate some of these top layers so that I make sure that the fabric here is pushed towards the inside. I think I gotta press that a little more. But basically, once I'm satisfied with how this is pressed, we're gonna top stitch all along the same seam line again, and then we'll be ready for the next step. All right, so here we go with the top stitching of the little gilet. This is where I get nervous. All right, and so what I always do as a technique, you can see there's your presser foot, right? And we'll just use the seam ripper as a pointer. So you do have this space that runs from here to here, right? What I find, I don't want edge of the presser foot like that. We want the stitching that's going to be to the edge like this. How I do that is I always align it so that you see how that is like just at the edge of the fabric there. I always put it so it's there or like just a hair past it, and that's how I do my edge stitching. And so now we are going to get started. Here we go. And then when I get to the edge here, I'll always do one back stitch like this, because if you have to pick out your stitches and go the other way, you have a little something to help hold things into place. And now we just turn it the other way. We got that edge of the fabric more or less lined up. One or two stitches will correct it the rest of the way, and here we go. Same thing, we get to the top here, take a stitch back, and turn. You've got a backing stitch there, you're ready to go, and look how nice that top stitching is turning out there, eh? Isn't that pretty? It's gonna look so finished and professional, which is what we want. Now this is where you are gonna use the art of sewing to finger press and manipulate this neckline a little to make sure all your lining fabric is tucked to the inside. Honestly guys, you just gotta pay attention and get it done. And go slow. As you can see me doing, I feel no urge to rush this portion of the project. I have no one to rush it for either, but there's no need to go fast if you don't want to. You can just keep working the project very carefully. Don't be afraid to manipulate the use of your presser foot once in a while to just position the feed of the fabric where you want it to be going. It's gonna get thick here. I've got a pretty tough machine for this though, right? Now I'm gonna turn this over this way because I wanna see this here. And you see, this is where I'm talking about you can finger press and manipulate the fabric the rest of the way that you want it to go to turn out something very neat and professional looking. And I know it's very slow. It sure beats picking stitches. I can tell you that much for sure. Just keep finger pressing and working that neckline. I've got it going pretty good, I think, really. We're coming up on another bump here at the next shoulder seam. This is the most challenging part, is getting over those thick seams. Take your time. Take your time. Careful, careful will win the race for you most times. Make sure as you're pressing this that you've got your fabric, you know, directing the way you want. You don't want something pulling and sagging in the wrong direction on you here, right? Know how fabric shifts and accommodate that. Anticipate it. And here we go. Now it's going to get moving again, nice and easy. Again, we get over to this corner. One stitch back, one stitch forward, turn. You're all set to go. Look at that. And again, here we are at the end. One stitch back, one stitch forward. Just that tiny bit of reinforcement. Line this up where you want it to go. It'll correct in 1 or 2 stitches. You're at that edge again. Here we go. And there, whoops, push this back a little out of the way. Look at this, guys. Now we have the front of the vest top stitched. Nice, neat insides. We're ready for the next steps. Just a heads up that I forgot to sew the armholes closed. It is this should have been done before that top stitching. I had to work really hard to get these things lined up because of the sequence I did it in. My advice to you, everyone, go and read your directions very carefully so you don't miss a step. Like I have done, now I have to do it this way and hope I don't have to pick out a bunch of stitching. Let's find out. And this time I have the dark bobbin thread on the bottom and the light thread on the top, simply to match what I'm about to stitch. You don't have to do it, guys. It's being fussy, but it really does make it just every little bit more professional, and I'm always about that. So let's try and make our work as beautiful as we can, right? So here we go. Edge of presser foot again, just 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Just keep that going as far around as you can. Remember, my thing wasn't cut straight, or it didn't line up, so that is why we have an overlap there. We're going to work with that. It's actually part of what we were going to trim away, but you can see I've actually waited until the garment assembly part to trim that away to make sure I could determine exactly where that trimming needed to be done. Honestly, guys, because of the sequence in which I did this, I'm probably going to turn this and check it before I clip those curves, just to make sure I haven't made a mess for myself somehow. There's one side done, and now we repeat on the other side. Here we go. And there we go. Now we're going to test that and clip the curves. And the plot thickens as I'm reminded that what we're going to have to do now is to turn this right side out. We're going to have to take these and push them through there to turn the whole thing right side out. So all I've done really, guys, is just turn this and make sure, do things look smooth? They do, because honestly, it's going to be a lot of work to turn this right side out. So we're just going to clip the curves and do it now. Let's go. So it's turned out to be physically impossible to turn this out. I have had to, this is what happens when we get clever ideas like, oh, I'll just quilt this and make it nicer quality, except we don't think about things like having to turn it out through tiny shoulder seams. So what I've had to do is open this up there so that I can even have half a chance of turning this right side out, because otherwise, guys, it's just not gonna turn through. But now look, by opening up that side seam, I can actually pull all of this to the right side out. And then, because it all has to be top stitched to close up anyways, what's gonna work out beautifully is we are still gonna be able to close up this shoulder seam and you're not gonna know what we went through. It'll be our little secret. No one else has to know. All right, guys, made major problems here. Look at this. I don't know how much did I stretch out the fabric trying to turn it right side out, or if it's the fact that my quilted design is not allowing it to turn out, but this is so bad. Do you know what I'm gonna do instead? I think I'm gonna pick these stitches out and literally turn it and just work it in by hand. It's the only way I can see to make a closed top stitched arm side that's gonna look right. And that's my own choice for having made this so thick. The original directions did call to just quilt the single piece of fabric, which would have been so light, right? I wanted the thick, plushy, quilty looking feel of having the authentic layers. It has made a construction problem here that, once again, if you're a new sewist, this is where you start crying and you throw the project aside and then you never finish it and you tell yourself, I suck, I can't sew. That's not true, all right? You just gotta think about it from a mathematical space. Once again, matter can't occupy the same space, right? So if you are having problems with fabric shifting, maybe you have to reapply your technique. That's what we're gonna do here. Pick out the stitches and do it differently. There's more than one way to get this done. I just want to show you what is happening here next. So on each of the arm size, what I've done is those parts that I had already clipped, I've pinned it down, and experience has taught me that on a fix like this, what we're gonna do, first I'm gonna run black stitching along here to just tack that down into place on each side. So we're gonna have a finished top, right? But it doesn't necessarily have the quilting stitching on top yet, okay? Then we're gonna take this piece and we're gonna be finger pressing and working it into place so that then we can stitch it all down. I will show you as we go. So the next step I'm going to do, which I'm not gonna film, is just on each side. I have this pinned up here, right? On each side, I'm just gonna run this with some black thread. Oh, the fine messes that we make for ourselves. Look at this, everyone. So you can see here, once I have my arm size have been, you know, pressed and stitched into place because we're doing this workaround, you can see this is where the problem was. We have a pretty big gap of fabric here. So to even effectively turn this in and clip the curves and whatnot, I'm going to have to trim this so that it's within a 1/4 inch of these arm size. Otherwise, we can't get this done. Let's watch as we do it. Now you can see what I've done here. Everything is pressed into place so that, there's always lint on my projects, eh? So that once this is turned out and we top stitch it, you're gonna see that everything's gonna go in there quite nicely. So that's our next step, that's our workaround to fix the arm side, and then hopefully we can resume the directions for assembly as are described in the book. Here it is with the arm size sewn. Do you see that there? So what I'm gonna do, guys, is I'm actually going to just leave the arm side. It has already double stitching of black thread going through here. So I think that even though there is top stitching along here, it already goes around the neckline. I don't think this is gonna be noticeable enough to go over it again. And honestly, I think if I went over it with the quilting stitching in the gold tone color, I think it's just gonna make it thick and bulky there. So this is another one of those places we do an ever so slight change in order to get through the project, because as soon as I deviated from the directions, I had to remember that that could make other directions deviate as well. But anyways, we're almost done this thing. It's starting to really look like a little vest. So I have read and reread some of these directions more times than I can count, and I don't understand the directions to close the side seams. So I am going to run a little machine stitch down each side of my nice little thick quilty jacket like that. Once I have that in place, I'm not even joking, I'm going to whip stitch the lining closed and then close it. All right, so now I have stitched these side seams and pressed them. By the time I hand stitch these, you can see I do have the ends matching up. The bottom will go up for the hem as expected, but there's the side seams. I got a little white thread to clip there, but in any event, I've stitched the sides, I've pressed it open, and now from here, we're just gonna be working this fabric until we can close this lining, and we're gonna hand stitch it. All right, let's go. So I want to show you here what we've done, because boy, I've strayed from the directions so far by now. I have wound up with a thick part here I'm still trying to fix. I have the rest of the lining pinned to be hand stitched down, and I'm going to duplicate it on the other side. Guys, it's going to look so cute when it's done, but boy oh boy, I've run into some snags. All right, with much determination, I've clipped some seam curves a little. I've actually got this pretty flat to hand stitch it down so that when we turn it right side out, there's a pinprick there still, right? But it's gonna look correct. So much work, guys, but here we go. Now what I have done is I've hand tacked this down and closed off all the inner sides. You can see this is like mostly finished. This is hand stitched down. Honestly, guys, my hand stitching's not amazing. It's something I gotta work on. So now all that we have to do here is run a top stitch, you know, starting from here along the back, and then we're on to buttons and buttonholes, and this will be done. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 buttonholes. This one I had to do twice. I've actually had to do and pick out some of these buttonholes more than once because this is very thick. This is very uneven with the pocket. Guys, these were actually pretty challenging little buttonholes to do. I'm gonna press this to remove the ink and chalk and cut these buttonholes, and we're gonna attach the buttons. This is the home stretch. I'm gonna cut the buttonholes. This is like the scary part, right? As I think I've shown you before, the best way I have found to cut a buttonhole, once you trim away loose threads like that, fold your buttonhole in half, and then you can take your scissors and just start working some snips. So there's one buttonhole cut. Grab a button, push it through. Does it go? Will it fit? Yep. Alright everyone, so now all these little buttonholes are sewn. You can see they do open up. They're pretty small and tight, but they do work. I've tested them all. So now, all that we have to do is position the buttons in line with these buttonholes. So just making sure your top and bottom line up pretty good there, like that. Do you see that? I'm making sure the bottom is flush, and then we're gonna start attaching the buttons. In this instance, because there's a little more flexibility with the neckline than the bottom, I'm actually going to attach my first buttonhole at the bottom. Here we go. I wanted to show you all that I did get this vest sewn so that it will button up I will point out that Freddie's Gilet is not worn buttoned up in the picture. I wanted to make sure that these were working, functioning, properly aligned buttons, but honestly guys, because it's so thick along here, they're crazy hard to do up and undo. So thank goodness Freddie wears his gilet open, because that's how we're gonna do it too. But I at least made sure it's an actual functioning garment. That's important to me, and it should be important to you too. So anyways, the buttons ended up being exceedingly challenging. Now I just have to add the decorative buttons on the pockets, and this is finally gonna be done.